gonna let it go. I'm gonna let it go. Wow, 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 wow. Well, good morning, Celebration Spiritual Center. Good. Yes, yes, yes. It feels so good up in here. And guess what? This feeling that you're feeling, that's what love is. It goes beyond tradition and it goes beyond culture. This is the feeling and the expression of love. And when you allow yourself to think just for a minute on how amazing it is to be loved and all the ways that we are loved, you cannot help but be moved. You cannot help but be moved. Well, I want to get into the message because I have some good things to talk about. I jokingly said to Pastor Yolanda this morning, I said I could preach for about an hour today. We're not going to do that. But I do believe that we have something that will be beneficial to everyone and will kind of meet you wherever you are in different ways. I'm going to drop little things here and there, and you might just want to just chew on that one thing, but it's all related to one entire point. So you'll probably want to listen back to this message a few times. So where we have been in this series, The Inside Joke, we started in week 1 with, okay, I'm not playing. Recognizing and realizing that we talked about this idea that basically there are inside jokes that are wonderful and funny when we're in on the joke, right? But when we don't know the joke, it doesn't feel so good. And so we went to Ernest Holmes and went to this idea that we feel many times, or the world feels many times, that suffering is God ordained. And it's just not true. And so we decided to quit playing with that idea, and we quit believing that idea, and we chose to, and we affirmed with our selfies that we're going to live a victorious life free from suffering. Now, in week 2, childish games, we looked at this idea of feeling that we can be threatened. And that's always a thing that we hear over and over. We hear it in the news. We hear it and see it in the way that people are interacting. But that's actually a childish game, as A Course in Miracles says, that when we believe that we have to be defensive, it's like a child who is starting to play games and act out because they need to go to sleep. Yeah, and so we... And so we move out of the childish games. Last week, we talked about giving and receiving, because so often we have been taught or led to believe that when we give, we lose, that we're giving away something. But the truth is, I receive what I give. And so as you are giving, in truth, what's happening is you're giving the very thing that you need, and that is how you receive. And so we talked about the beautiful cycle of giving and receiving. So this week, I want to start by talking a little bit about video games. Now, it's something that I love to talk about metaphysically because there's so many cool opportunities to look at how life works and how the principles work and how the law works and how our lives work by considering video games. And the thing that I want to focus on here is to understand what's happening when we're playing a video game, what's actually happening in the computer or at the level of the console, right? Now, you could be playing any game, say it was a racing game, right? And what's wonderful about if you're in a car, if you're in an arcade, it even feels like you're in a vehicle. But even if you're at home, and video games are so much more realistic than when I was a kid, that it's wonderful to really get caught in this immersive experience, and you feel like you're driving. Now, from the level of the console, there are 3 things that are always happening to create the experience that you want to experience as the player. At the level of the console, what's happening is the console has a memory of the previous screen. Now, what's happening first is that what we see as a flowing picture is actually 60 different images per second, right? 60 frames per second. We might be familiar with that term, right? So that's what's happening. There's actually, what you see in a split second is actually 60 different images being flashed in your screen. So we have to have the memory of the previous screen in order to create each additional frame, right? Also within the game are the programmed laws of physics, right? So if you're playing a game that's set in the real world, then we know, if you turn left, it goes left. If you turn right, you go right. Now, if you're playing a game that's programmed based on the law of physics and you're in space, right, you're flying around, that vehicle is going to respond differently because you're in space. And that's programmed into the game. So you feel like you're flying. You feel like you're in space. And then finally, it takes the input of you, the player. Whatever you push, whichever button you push, that's then what determines what happens to the vehicle. Yes, yes? And so what's interesting is when you understand that, what's happening in the video game, and I want to, there's 3 books I'm going to recommend here if you just want to dig a little deeper into it. The first is The Field Paradigm by Joachim Claes. And he writes about this idea of video games, and he says this: programmers don't program every possibility of where the car can go. They just program some laws, let the player move within them, and the computer calculates the new world accordingly. You understand that? That in the video game, what's happening in the video game, it doesn't have a memory of every possible move. What it's doing is responding to what you're inputting. Lord have mercy, you'll see what happens metaphysically, right? It's responding to your input based on the laws and programs that are within the game, right? It doesn't have every possible move. That's so incredible for us to know. And then he goes on, he says, when we understand this and we start to look at how this plays out in our world, he says that everything is ultimately vibrations on the ocean of consciousness, including our thoughts. Every time we have a thought, we will create a ripple in the field of consciousness, and that ripple influences the entire universe and everything in it. These ripples are usually small and the effect is negligible, but if enough people create the same ripple together, like many millions of people in a city having stressful thoughts, sooner or later the effect will begin to show, like a rising crime rate. So just like the video games happen, again, there's some universal laws, programmed laws and principles in this time-space reality that we call life, that, again, every possibility, it's not like every possibility exists in the sense of every move in the game, but simply what's happening is because of these programmed laws, there are all these things that are possible based on what we input into it. But because we don't understand that and we don't know that, then we have a limitation of the game. This is why some people are amazing gamers, and others of us may not be that good depending on what the game is, because we don't understand these 3 levels of what's actually happening within the game. And so in our world, as we live in this time-space reality, there is this field, like the game, that is responding to us. There's this field that we are inputting information into, and as it says here in this wonderful example, right, many times the ripples and the influences are small, and the effect is negligible. You know, like you say, I am prosperous once a month, and then you're waiting for prosperity to show up in your life, right? That's not how it works. But if, in this context, if enough people create the same ripple together, like many millions of people in a city having stressful thoughts, or in a nation having stressful and fearful thoughts, or in a planet having stressful and fearful thoughts, sooner or later, the effect will begin to show, like a rising crime rate. Like things are just terrible and bad in the White House, right? All these things begin to happen because there is information that's being placed into the field, and the game is simply responding to what we're inputting. You all get that? Now, again, if you want to understand and learn a little bit more about the field, because this is not what the message is about, The Field Paradigm, Joachim Claes, C-L-A-E-S, right? Or a book I love, The Field by Lynn McTaggart, powerful, powerful text. And then Conscious Universe by Dr. Dean Radin. And, well, Lynn McTaggart and Dean Radin particularly are, they're cut from the same cloth, and so they reference each other a lot. So if you want to understand more about the field, go to those texts, okay? But what we want to talk about today is, because the field exists, because there is a field that connects us all, because there is a field that responds to us, because there is a field that has programmed universal laws and principles, we can break the rules and create miracles. In the same way that video games work, in the same way that you can do amazing and wonderful things. And again, those that know how the game works, you can find Easter eggs and hidden places and ways to get around certain levels and skip levels. All of these things are possible within the game if you understand this. We can break the rules and create miracles. And just so we're clear, remember, as A Course in Miracles teaches us, a miracle is a shift in perception. It's a few moves in the video game that change the entire experience. A few moves in the video game that changes the entire experience. So the question becomes, how does a metaphysician break the rules? Now, there are many ways, but I want to focus on 3 things today. 1 is through God realization. 2 is by moving on up. And 3, by understanding the uncomfortable. 1, God realization. 2, moving on up. 3, understanding the uncomfortable. So God realization, what are we talking about here? And this is partially what we've been talking about in terms of the field and understanding that there's something that is responding to us, something that we get to input information into and receive a result, receive a demonstration, receive a manifestation. And the way I like to think about this is to simply say that when I'm in a point of fear, doubt, and worry, when I'm in a situation where I think I'm in crisis, I say to myself, wait a minute, I'm God. Now, when I say, wait a minute, I'm God, I am not saying that I am the all that is. I am not saying that I am some holy being that must be worshiped. I love the way the Kabbalion puts it when you consider the author Charles Dickens, who created Oliver Twist, right? And so Charles Dickens is the author, the creator. Oliver Twist is the character that comes from the mind of Charles Dickens. It would be foolish for Oliver Twist to say, I am Charles Dickens. Yes, yes? But yet and still we understand that Oliver Twist comes from the mind of Charles Dickens and cannot exist without Charles Dickens. And in truth, Oliver Twist is one with Charles Dickens. Yes, yes? And so is the same for each and every one of us. So when we say, wait a minute, I'm God, what we're saying is we're realizing this God potential, this God thing that lives, moves, and has its being within us. I shared this quote from Neville Goddard in our 90 Days to Greatness Mastermind yesterday, and I actually saw it about 4 times all over social media, so I was like, oh, I guess I'm supposed to share this today. And Neville Goddard, in a lecture he gave called The Mystery of Inspiration, he says this: do not be embarrassed when I tell you that you are God. Instead, walk believing that you are important. You don't have to become arrogant, but you must assume you are God. Think about it. Stop believing in God and start believing as God. Do this, and visions will come to confirm your assumption. So again, when I'm in crisis, when I'm in fear, when I'm in doubt, when I'm in worry, and things are looking bleak and dark and hopeless, I need to say, wait a minute, I'm God. In truth, what I need to do is stop believing in God and start believing as God. And as I began to contemplate that, I wanted to give us a new definition for faith. If we say that we have faith, and if we're activating our faith or operating in faith, what we in truth are doing is believing and knowing as God. That's faith. Now, the other thing, and Neville Goddard talks a little bit about this in this lecture. Again, you can Google it and find it, The Mystery of Inspiration. He talks about this idea, if we understand that, wait a minute, I'm God, what we're also looking at is understanding that we are not these bodies. These things that I call our soul clothing, that's not who and what you are. Why? Because it is God. It is the God in you. It is life itself that is animating your soul clothing. We have all experienced the transition of a loved one, and we have seen that casket laying up in the ground, up in front of the church or wherever it was, and there was no life. Yes, yes? Because the God presence had been removed from that piece of clothing. That's all that happened, right? And so we understand that this thing, as much as we love it, this thing, as much as we adorn it, is not the thing. Your soul clothing has no life, and it reminded me of, we've heard this quote many times, I'm sure many of you have, from Baba Ram Das, treat everyone you meet like God in drag, right? And I love that. Now, I love it for so many reasons. This is a message all by itself, and I want to break this down a little bit because there's so many layers of meaning in this, right? Yeah. Now, of course, first what he's saying, treat everyone you meet like God in drag, is saying be kind to everybody. That's the first layer of meaning, right? And this is just on a metaphysical but mystical level. We have to understand that every bit of truth has layers of meaning. And to the extent that we increase our awareness, we begin to understand and really dig deeper into the meaning. And so, for instance, this is why if we think about the Jewish tradition and we look at Kabbalah, what's taught is that All of the stories that we read in the First Testament or the Old Testament are taught as literal truths until you increase your awareness and expand, and within Kabbalah, that's at the age of 40, that then you start to understand and you're taught the mystical and metaphysical meaning behind the very same stories. So we're just going to break down some of the layers of this. So again, to children, we would say, treat everyone you meet like God and drag, and we're teaching them to be kind. Right? And we all need to learn that, right? But then as we move up in our level of understanding, as we increase our level of understanding, what we're also saying is treat everyone you meet like God and drag. We're saying that everyone you meet is God. Everyone you meet is holy. Everyone you meet is divine. And then if we take it another level, because we're not just saying that everyone outside of you is holy and divine because someone else is encountering you, that means you are also holy and divine. So this is where we get to the truth of namaste. Right? We've just gone through 3 layers of meaning for this one beautiful phrase. But then it goes a little deeper. Treat everyone you meet like God and drag. It also then teaches us that we are not what we see ourselves to be. Our bodies are a costume. In truth, all of us are here. We are God itself in a costume. That's what we are. Now, here's where it gets interesting. This is the deepest layer of meaning. I'm going to leave it alone after this. Our bodies are a costume, right? The life of God is the thing that's animating us, that's activating us. But where it gets deeper is that your thoughts, beliefs, and expectations are the ultimate costume. Take a breath. I want you to hear that. Your thoughts, your beliefs, and your expectations are the ultimate costume. And so many of us are dressing God in worry. Many of us are dressing God in unworthiness. Many of us are dressing God in doubt and fear. Many of us are dressing God in lack. Many of us are dressing God in limitation. And so we can go back to the first meeting. Treat everyone like you meet like God and drag. Be kind to everyone. Because many times what's happening when we see someone act out of turn, when we see someone act out of their right mind, it's because they put on a costume that's not who and what they are. And so we can be kind to them. We can forgive them because we recognize, oh, they're in the worst kind of drag costume they could ever put themselves in. They do not look cute right now. God realization. We say to ourselves, wait a minute, I'm God. Wait a minute, I am not this body. Wait a minute, I am not this bank account balance. Wait a minute, I am not this diagnosis or this prognosis. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Wait a minute, I am not these thoughts of fear. Wait a minute, I am not these thoughts of doubt. Wait a minute, I am not these thoughts of unworthiness and smallness. Wait a minute. I come back to the realization of my God nature. 2, move on up. I was teaching this idea in 90 Days to Greatness on Monday night, and we came a little bit to it even in 4Ts on Thursday night. In the Kabbalion, there's the principle of rhythm. And the principle of rhythm says this very simply. Everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. And so we understand this. We can look at nature. We can look at even the time that we're in now. The text goes further and it says night follows day, right? That's rhythm. And day follows night. That's rhythm. The pendulum swings from summer to winter, and from winter to spring, and from spring to summer, and from summer to fall, right? We have that wonderful movement, again, of the tides, and it goes again, it says atoms, molecules, all masses of matter swing around the circle of their nature, or the nucleus, as we learned in school. There is no such thing as absolute rest or cessation from movement, and all movement partakes of rhythm. This is good news for so many reasons. This is why we always affirm that beautiful affirmation and verse in the Tao Te Ching. All of life is a movement toward our wholeness, right? The truth of that statement, the truth of that affirmation, the truth of that knowing is based on this principle of rhythm, that there is always a swing, that there is always a movement. But what's interesting about that, when we understand that there's always a movement, we use that on this level of consciousness, of humanness, we use that to justify loss and lack. that sometimes I'm supposed to be without. Or we get scared when we're in abundance and we're like, oh, when is it going to leave me? Maybe I'm the only one that's experienced that? Okay. And so when we understand this principle of rhythm, it can actually bring us into fear, right? Because when we feel like we have good happening in our lives, we're like, wait, Pastor Greg said the pendulum swings. And so I'm going to swing back to the negative. Now, first of all, there's two things to know. First, as it says that rhythm compensates, what we must understand is that the negative is the precedent to the positive. But what that also means is that you do not, once you reach the positive pole, you can stay there. We're going to talk about why, right? Now, understanding that we can, well, actually, let me back up because I want to make sure we all understand this. So when I say that the negative is the precedent to the positive, this is where Abraham Hicks' teaching is really good. Because Abraham teaches us about contrast, right? That when we're experiencing an unwanted thing, what does that do? It sends off rockets of desire, as Abraham would say, and it's really giving birth to the wanted experience. And so we can use a tool like the law of attraction T tool, which we use and teach many times. You can draw a line down the middle of a sheet of paper and draw a line at the top. On one side, what I don't want, and that's when you're in the fear, doubt, and worry, and I don't want to get kicked out of my apartment. I don't want to lose my apartment. I don't want this. I don't write, whatever it may be, and you're writing all these things. I don't want. And then you pivot. Because all of these things are telling you what you really want. What's the opposite of this thing? I want to stay in my apartment. I want a nicer apartment. I want all my rent paid up a year in advance. Whatever it may be. All of a sudden, you're getting clear about what you do want. You're swinging the pendulum to the other way. And the unwanted thing is what gave birth to it. That's why the negative is precedent to the swing the other way. But here's where it gets interesting. Because within this principle of rhythm, you can utilize the law of neutralization to rise above this swing. What we find in our world right now, in the world of economics, and economics is based 100% on the thoughts, fears, and opinions of people. There's a constant swing back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. But within that swing back and forth, there are some of us that continue to prosper. How is that possible? It's because of this law of neutralization. And within the law of neutralization, what we're able to do is move on up. We're able to rise to a higher consciousness on a general plane, and this is a very, very general, what I'm saying here, is there are two planes of consciousness. There's a higher and a lower. There's a conscious plane and an unconscious plane. In truth, there are many planes within those planes, but just so we're clear right now, there's a higher and lower. There's a conscious and unconscious. There's a woke and there's a sleep, okay? And what we have the opportunity to do is move on up and decide. I've shared this story, I'm sure, a few times, but it perfectly illustrates this. There was a time when this was during the economic downturn after the housing crisis, and I was working in publishing, and particularly many publishing companies were starting to downsize, many were starting to close. This was also in the midst of this time of moving from print to digital, and so more people were starting to buy ebooks instead of traditional books, et cetera, et cetera. And so the company that I worked for, the publisher that I worked for, we did not experience any layoffs, but we were told that no one was getting a bonus. And it was kind of like, just be happy for your job. And so things didn't feel good in reading all the industry trades. We were reading about layoffs happening, and there was a fear that it could still happen to our company. And my brothers in the IT department, we used to joke around about it, and we adopted this song, a song by an underground rapper in Detroit, It's So Cold in the D. Right, you know that song, huh? Shout out. And the song says, it's so cold in the D, how the hell we gonna keep peace, right? And so we use that to just talk about, yeah, it's really bad, it's so cold. And we used to laughingly sing this song to each other, till one day I came to myself, I said, wait a minute, I'm God. I said, I can't affirm this. I can't affirm this truth, because if I continue to affirm it's so cold in the D, how am I ever gonna have peace? And so I made a decision that I would never sing that song again. I said, y'all can laugh and joke and have your good time. I can't sing that song anymore. That's not the truth of my life. And so what happened for me is months went by, and it came time when we would have normally gotten our bonuses, and my manager calls me into his office. I didn't know why, any number of things could have been going on. And he slides me a piece of paper with a number on it. I look at it. He says, "Congratulations. You did an amazing job this year. Everybody's not getting a bonus, and please don't tell anybody about this. But I wanted to make sure that you got a bonus this year." And that was exactly the money that I needed to take care of some things that were going on in my life. And there was no way, in my mind, I was like, I don't know where this money is coming from. Normally, I would think it was coming from my bonus because I expected a certain amount of money around that time of year, but that's not what was going on. And he said, "Yeah, this will be in your bank account tomorrow." I rose up in consciousness, moved out of the swing of the unconscious, those that were just being moved and swayed by what the news was saying, moved and swayed by what the industry trades were saying, moved and swayed by what was going on in other companies. I rose up in consciousness. I moved on up a little higher. Now, we can do that many other ways. Denials and affirmations are a wonderful way to do that. What I shared in class on Monday, if you go back to Dr. Martin Luther King's speech when he accepted the Nobel Peace Prize, he uses denials. He uses a series of sentences where he says, "I refuse to believe, I refuse to accept, And it's a beautiful illustration of his consciousness and how he was able to enact and affect change in, through, and as his life and his ministry, because he polarized himself. He rose up in consciousness. He moved on up a little bit higher and says, "I refuse to accept this thing that my eyes are showing me. I refuse to accept this thing that people are saying. I refuse to accept this thing that even I'm experiencing as racism and injustice. But I recognize that this is not the fullness of who we can be and who we are." And so this is why he was able to experience, and we are able to enjoy the fruits of that consciousness today. So as we refuse, then we affirm what is true. This, of course, is then how we can use spiritual mind treatment, how we can use affirmative prayer. If you want to hang out with us next Sunday, this is what we do when we use the work. One belief at a time, or using the Judge Your Neighbor worksheet. We're questioning our thoughts. And by questioning our thoughts, we set ourselves free and we rise up in consciousness to the woke plane, to the higher plane, to the conscious plane. So an easy way for us to think about this, if you want to move on up a little bit higher, go to the penthouse in your mind. When you feel yourself in that worry, doubt, and fear, when you feel yourself in that place of feeling like all is lost, first you realize your God nature and you say, "Wait a minute, I'm God." You start believing as God and knowing as God, and then you say, "Where's the penthouse?" Because I'm not in the penthouse right now. That's why it feels so terrible. Where's the penthouse? And you go to your tools, the tools that will take you to the penthouse. Finally, how does a metaphysician break the rules? She understands the uncomfortable. Now, there are 2 sermons I invite you to go back to. They're on YouTube. Don't Judge the Chrysalis. This is from way back in I think like our first year. And another message, the God experience. And the God experience is an interesting message for me because we were at a semi-crisis moment in the early life of CSC. We were literally about 2 months old. And like many of us, Pastor Yolanda and I, of course, we've been clear about the vision of CSC, and the vision was grand, right? In 2013, we saw CSC as it will be at 10 years or at 20 years, right? And so our desire was to try to make it look like what we saw, although that was a ways away off. And so what we did is we secured a space that was too big, right? We secured a space that was too expensive. It was big enough for the first service, right? We had about 200 people there. Next service, we had about 10, right? And so, of course, we're, standing in belief and knowing, and we're like, we're going to keep moving forward, we're going to keep moving forward. But now we're developing a balance, right? And so we were clear, because our threshold for pain is really low, that we needed to move. And we did. We moved. And so we moved to South Oxford space. We were just talking about that the other day, Sydney. We moved to South Oxford space, but I recognized that our team at that moment was a little scared. Because they were like, wait a minute, you know, things started out, it was like this big bang and 200 people were there and it was awesome, and now it's like 10 people, and now we got this balance, and what are we gonna do? And so I preached this message, the God experience. And what I talked about in that message was this idea that we must understand that life is always a conversation. Nothing is happening to us. Nothing is even happening for us. It's happening through us. And because it's happening through us, that means that we get to think the thoughts that then, as I talked about earlier with the video game, that then cause something to happen in the game. We input, and it responds back to us. And so I said in that message that then when we're in this moment of crisis, what we get excited because we say, I'm having a God experience. Many of us say other things, which I'll talk about in a minute, but if you name it a God experience, you've now named it a way for you to experience your power. You've now shifted it from being something wrong and something bad, and you've shifted from being a victim to now recognizing that you're moving into victory. And after we had that experience and I preached that message, and I remember many people coming to me and saying, thank you, that was just what I needed to hear. Not just or not so much for what was happening at CSC, but the reflection always is, if it's happening in the church, it's happening in the community. And so everybody was having individual God experiences that they needed to hear a word around, right? It was beautiful. And so Pastor Yolanda and I, we were in prayer daily, knowing that this thing would be taken care of easily and effortlessly. And I think we had about what was it, $4,000 balance? Yeah, I had a $4,000 balance. And I remember the day so clearly. We stood in the middle of our living room and we prayed as we were praying every day, affirmatively, knowing, letting it go, amen, ashe, and so it is, and went about our business because we had to work on some marketing materials for the church. We ain't got time to be worrying about a balance. And as we sat down there in front of the computer and we were doing our work in joy and having a good time and creating a video and laughing and talking and being excited, I got a pop-up on my phone. A PayPal donation of $4,000. And we needed the money by the next day. I know this thing works, right? It works all the time, easily and effortlessly, but you gotta understand the uncomfortable. And we've named it other things. Many times we say, this is hard, this is tough. But you can say, this is unfamiliar, I'm creating a new normal. See, when you get comfortable with the uncomfortable, when you understand the uncomfortable, and you understand that the uncomfortable is what's required to have a new experience. The uncomfortable is what's required for you to experience the thing that it is you want to be, that you want to do, that you want to have. You're not currently living it. You're being required to become something different, and it feels uncomfortable. It's not hard, it's not tough, but it is uncomfortable. It's unfamiliar. I'm creating a new normal. Many times we say, this is too painful, this hurts, but you can affirm, I am transitioning into something new. I am in the chrysalis. I am becoming a butterfly. You recognize that this is what's happening. It's just a transition. It's not hard. It's not tough. It's unfamiliar. Yes, it may even be uncomfortable, but you're transitioning. You're in a chrysalis and becoming a butterfly. You might say, I don't like change, or change is hard, but what you can simply say is, I am in the unknown and I am drawing a new life to me. Lord, have mercy. How do you break the rules? You understand the uncomfortable. You can say, I am in the unknown. I am initiating myself into greatness. So how does a metaphysician break the rules? She understands these things. She says, wait a minute, I am God. She chooses to believe and know as God, not just to believe in God, not just to believe that power exists, not just to believe that love exists, not just to believe that intelligence exists, but to now believe that it exists as you, in you, and through you. But to now believe that this possibility lives in you, as you, and through you. How does a metaphysician break the rules? She moves on up. She goes to the penthouse of her mind. She realizes that she's way down in the basement where it's dusty and cobwebs and moldy and foolishness. And how about this? Old stuff that you know you were supposed to throw away a long time ago. I get on the elevator right now and I press PH. and I go to the penthouse of my mind. I raise myself up in consciousness. I use my tools. I deny and I affirm. I use my tools. I affirmatively pray. I use my tools. I use forgiveness, which we talked about last week. I will receive what I give. Forgiveness is a wonderful tool. You want to break some rules. I use the work. I question these thoughts. And when you do those things, finally you understand the uncomfortable. And you name this experience differently. It feels painful, and the meaning that you've applied is pain because it's unfamiliar. It's simply unfamiliar. Just like tying your shoes was unfamiliar at one point in your life. Just like feeding yourself was unfamiliar at one point in your life. It was uncomfortable because it was unknown. It was unfamiliar. Can you tie your shoes today? Can you feed yourself today? So you already understand the uncomfortable. You already understand how to move from one state of being into another. You already know how to change the video screen. You already know how to make life respond to you. With that, I invite everybody to stand. We take a deep breath in and we release. We breathe in and we breathe out. There is one mind, there is one power, there is one presence, there is one life working in all, through all, and as all. That mind is my mind, that power is my power, that life is the life that is animating this being that I am in possession of right here and right now. I recognize that the intelligence behind every outpicturing of intelligence is you, Mother, Father, God. I recognize that you are the love that expresses in, through, and as all things. I recognize you are the power that empowers us to be, to do, and have whatever it is that we want. I recognize in this moment that you are the formless substance that becomes anything based on the mold of expectations and belief and knowing that each and every one of us create. And I recognize and remember that you are here now. You are here now not just because we praise and celebrate. You are here now not because of anything we do, but simply because you are omnipresence. You are everywhere at all times, constantly encountered. There is no spot where God is not. And as I know this to be true, I remember that I am one with you and I am one of you. I recognize that each and every one of my sisters and brothers that are here is one with you and one of you. Recognizing that we not only believe in you, but we believe as you. For you are living, moving, and having your being in, through, and as us, just as we live, move, and have our being in, through, and as you. And as I know these truths to be true, I now speak this word affirmatively. I speak this word on behalf of each and every person that is listening, and I speak this word on behalf of each and every person that is streaming. I speak this word on behalf of each and every person that will encounter this message at any point in time in history. My sister, my brother, I know your power and I know your worth. As the scripture says, before you were in your mother's womb, the all that is knew you. And as you are out of your mother's womb, the all that is knows you. It is animating you. It is life in you. And as you leave this form, so it shall be with you always and always and always and always. My sister, my brother, you are a miracle worker. You have the capability and possibility to shift your perception and shift your awareness and create a new experience. So right here and right now, I invite you to push the buttons. I invite you to push and move the buttons so that you create a new reality on the screen of your life. Right here and right now, I invite you to input worthiness into the video game. Right here and right now, I invite you to input prosperity, knowing that you are abundant. Right here and right now, I invite you to input peace, knowing that you can have peace in your life, in every area of your life. Right here and right now, I invite you to input healing, knowing that you have a healed mind, you have a healed body, you have a healed life. I invite you right now to input wealth onto the screen of your video game of your life right now, and let it be seen, and let it be known, and let it be experienced. For you are the light of the world, and as you shine your light, you are teaching each and every one of us that we can shine our lights. As you shine your light, as you input this information upon the screen of your life, you are teaching each and every one of us that we have the capability, possibility to do the very same thing. I am so grateful and thankful for you, the miracle worker. I am so grateful and thankful for you, the Christ in form. I am so grateful and thankful for you, the knower. I am so grateful and thankful for you, the seeker. I am so grateful and thankful for you, the miracle worker. That through your thoughts, you will create ripples in consciousness of peace and healing and abundance all across the earth. We are in a state of uncomfortability right now on our planet. But we as metaphysicians understand the uncomfortable. So we as metaphysicians right here and right now affirm, wait a minute, I am God. And as we affirm, wait a minute, I am God, we now go to the penthouse of our minds and consciousness. We rise above the swing of the pendulum that is moving the masses to and fro, that is keeping the masses in fear, that is keeping the masses stuck. We rise up in consciousness and bring our brothers and sisters up with us, for we recognize that in this place of consciousness, there is a beloved community. In this place of consciousness, there are no more wars. In this place of consciousness, our planet is healed. In this place of consciousness, our waters are healed. In this place of consciousness, we are set free. In this place of consciousness, we are abundant. In this place of consciousness, there is no separation. In this place of consciousness, there is one race. In this place of consciousness, we are good and only good. So from this awareness, we choose to stay here. We choose to live here. And to all of our brothers and sisters, we say, come on up. Lift up your thoughts a little bit higher. Come on up. And so with joy and thanksgiving, I release this prayer in consciousness back into the law. This thing that always responds to me, I let it respond lovingly, equally, easily, and effortlessly. And with joy and thanksgiving, we lift up our voices and we say, amen, ashe. And so it is. And so it is. Thank you, God. Thank you, God.